Good afternoon and welcome to our Ask Her webinar, Love in Action, Building Supportive Systems for LGBTQ plus Youth. My name is Sarah Weatherby and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Communications at Washington Area Women's Foundation. At this time, the Women's Foundation would like to thank you for being here with us today and also take time to warmly welcome Kenya Colbert and Lisa Schulman, our American Sign Language interpreters for today's webinar. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Women's Foundation is a community-supported foundation that invests in the power of women and girls of color in the Washington metropolitan area. Through our commitment to grant making and advocacy, we drive transformative change by amplifying the voices and experiences of women and girls of color and collaborate with partners to influence policies and philanthropy with a focus on gender and racial equity. Before I pass the mic over to our moderator for today, we invite you to engage in today's discussion by asking questions in the Q&A box and sharing your thoughts in the chat. Also, if you find today's conversation meaningful, please consider supporting us at thewomensfoundation.org/askher. Your contribution today will play a vital role in helping us continue supporting initiatives that benefit young women and gender-expansive youth in our community. Thank you again for joining us, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Tamara Wilds-Lawson, President and CEO of the Women's Foundation.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are joined by leaders from two incredible organizations who are at the forefront of transformative advocacy work for youth in our region. And before we get started, I want to take some time to introduce both of them to you today. First, we have Kristi Matthews, Director of the DC Girls Coalition, a grantee partner organization of the Women's Foundation that supports young girls of color, transgender girls of color, and gender nonconforming people of color in advocating for issues that impact them. Before this role, Kristi worked at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless for nearly 15 years as their grassroots advocacy coordinator. There, she collaborated with people experiencing poverty to advocate for services, resources, and the dismantling of systemic oppression. She also served as the grassroots advocacy coordinator at the Fair Budget Coalition and was a lead instructor for the Black Swan Academy, an after-school program that empowers Black and Brown youth to discover pride, power, and a sense of self and community. I think we could all use some of that. Kristi holds 2 master's degrees from Walden University, one in social psychology and the other in clinical mental health counseling. Welcome, Kristi. And we also have Erin Whelan with us today. Erin has served as SMYAL's executive director since September of 2023, where her leadership continues to bolster the organization as a vital resource for LGBTQ plus youth in Washington, D.C. Erin brings nearly 20 years of innovative experience in nonprofit management, team cultivation, program development and oversight, and community collaboration to what is essentially a new role since she started in the fall. Since joining SMYAL, Erin has spearheaded several successful initiatives that have significantly expanded the organization's outreach and support services. Her strategic vision and hands-on approach have strengthened programs designed to meet the diverse needs of LGBTQ plus youth, fostering an environment where young people can thrive. Erin's multifaceted life experiences as a queer woman, licensed therapist, Taurus, and mother enhance her approach to her work empowering queer and trans youth. Welcome, Erin.
So much.
Thank you for both being here today. Before we dive in, there are a couple of statistics that I wanted to share that highlight the pervasive unhoused crisis among the youth we're going to be discussing today. And I wanted to start that way because often people think about challenges in silos rather than thinking through how various issues intersect. And so I thought this would be a good jumping off point for today's conversation. So according to the 2022 Youth Count Survey for Homeless Youth by DC Action, 4 out of 5 of the youth were Black, 1 out of 5 were parents, 32% of non-parenting homeless youth in DC or unhoused youth in DC identified as LGBTQ+. Additionally, 7% of these non-parenting homeless youth identified as non-cisgender, including those identifying as transgender and other gender expressions. Among youth who are homeless without a parent or guardian, 38% have experienced domestic violence, and of those, more than half, 61%, reported that their housing issues began because of some form of violence. And I was hesitant to start with such an intense stat, but thought it was important just to kind of ground the conversation in how hard it is for many youth in this community to live and to access the quality of life that that many other folks take for granted. And so it's in that spirit that I want to get us started and hear from both of you how you got into this work and how you were inspired to take on the roles that that you currently have. And let's start with Erin.
So I regularly say that this work found me. It was not intentional that I was going to go into this work. I thought I was going to be practicing therapy in an office, 4 walls. And as I was finishing graduate school, couldn't find an internship. And the last place that accepted me was a place on the south side of Chicago working with LGBTQ plus youth experiencing homelessness. And it was the first time in terms of, for me, that I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know the setting and learned so much in such a short amount of time. And so I've really been doing this specific work focused on youth experiencing homelessness, and specifically, as you mentioned, the more marginalized communities, LGBTQ plus youth, Black and brown youth, trans youth, and just that's kind of my calling in life. And so, as you mentioned, I moved my family across the country in the fall of 22 and have been here working with SMYAL.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, Erin. And I love the concept of work finding us, our life's passion finding us. Kristi, how about you?
Hi, can y'all hear me? So I have always had a passion for giving back to my community and supporting my community. In college, I used to work at an organization as a coordinator called Glen Haven Multicultural After School Tutorial Program, where I work with young people and children who are refugees from war-torn countries who have resettled in North Carolina. So it's always been something that has been dear to my heart. And I think for me, that is because I've had people in my life, all my life, who have been supportive of my family and all the things that we've been through. I lost my brother at a very young age to cancer, and we had a significant amount of organizations that stepped in and supported us. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And my dad specifically used to tell me all the time, give what you can afford to lose. And the only thing I can afford to lose is time. And that is why I contribute the way that I do. And I got into the DC Girls Coalition because as you heard in my intro, I used to work at Black Swan Academy as their first lead instructor. I've always had a passion for working with young people and convened the DC Girls Coalition. They asked me if I was interested, and I was at a point in my career where I was really ready to commit myself to working with young people, really ready to like pass some of the knowledge I've gained at the Little Clinic and other organizations down to the next generation. So it just felt like the perfect opportunity to branch into that. And that is essentially how I've gotten into this particular position in this work.
Thanks for sharing that, Kristi. And I really want our time together to flow more like a conversation. So that's the last time I'm going to name who should answer. I want you two to just feel free to jump in whatever order. And if something that I ask resonates with you. And so I'm interested to know, there are a lot of organizations dedicated to young people that struggle to actually center their voices. So I am curious to know, and I think those who have joined us would be interested to hear how you all ensure that the voices of the young people that you are supporting and serving are at the forefront of your work and advocacy efforts.
So, Kristi, go for it.
You go for it.
Okay. So I've been doing work side by side with young people for about 10 years, and I thought it would, for me, it was hard. It was hard to come and think about, as a provider that had been doing this for so long, to sit with young people and create together. And it really took a dismantling of the table that adults in the room had created, and often white women in the room had created, to really think about how can we authentically bring all the voices that need to be in this room to create something that's meaningful. And so I will say the personal struggle was really hard. And I had to put a lot of my ego aside, had to slow everything down because everyone comes with a different perspective. And it was a really big challenge. And, I think a lot of times you'll hear providers saying youth voice, because all these funders want to hear it. But when in reality, how youth voice plays a role in your organization and the creation of the things that you're putting out, the advocacy efforts, whatever it might be, is not always aligning with what maybe that is. And so I think at SMYAL for us, still struggle with this and still struggle to consistently and intentionally sit side by side with youth and co-create together, instead of coming to them with something that was created and advising us. And that sometimes is what I think providers can get stuck in. And so, we are regularly having this conversation. We just completed a strategic plan, and this is one of the key initiatives, is for us to truly understand what it means, and again, consistently what it means for us as an organization to prioritize youth voice.
I really appreciate you naming that struggle and, owning that it's difficult, particularly in a country that is super ageist, right? That doesn't really truly value youth voices and involvement, because it isn't easy, right? It requires a level of consensus that just it's not encouraged, and it doesn't happen. It's particularly in most professional settings. And so there has to be a level of intentionality. And what I heard you say, Erin, is that it's a work in progress, but that intentionality is one of the goals. And I applaud you and your team for that, because it's a journey. It's not a destination, right? Something you can check a box and we've done it. Kristi, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yes. Can everyone hear me? I saw someone say it's hard to hear us. I don't know how we adjust that, but I will try to talk louder. So I just wanted to add, I think that one of the critical ways that we at the DC Girls Coalition ensure that the youth voice was leading us is that when we reconvene from the foundation, we made sure young people were a part of the beginning process. So they are the ones who helped develop our mission statement, our vision statement, our values. They were the ones who helped define our laws and how we will operate. And we made it, even when we met with all of our individual organizations that are members, like SMYAL is a member, when we met with all of our individual organizations, we made sure that they understood coming to this table meant that youth would be making the final decision. So we have a youth advisory board that is made up of young people of color, that every they do 2-year terms, and they are the ones who are the final decision making on all of our work. And we've seen that play out where they have stopped us from doing things. We've seen it play out where they have forced us to do things because this is what they wanted to do. do. And I think that what is critical, if you really truly want youth voice to be at the foundation of your work, you have to be prepared and ready to step to the side and support them doing that. And that's what we have tried to do at the coalition. We have several different ways that we meet with other young people and incorporate them in our work and have them really help us decide what we're going to do. And we are grateful and very grateful that our organizations, that our members have agree with that process and have gone along with that process and supported that. And I think the other really big piece is that it was critical that we made youth voice a part of our values. And it's a very clearly stated one of our values that we are youth led. It's critical in our work. And I think the other biggest thing that we do, anything that we're invited to for advocacy or organizing, we make sure that we try to bring young people into the room. We try to make all of our meetings at a time where young people can participate. We try to do all of our actions at a time where young people can participate. And I think that it's critical because if you want it to be youth-led, youth voice, you need to make sure that the meetings and the spaces and the convening is happening at a time when they are available.
There's that intentionality again, Kristi. I appreciate that. You've got to be, it sounds like, mindful at every turn to create the environment in which youth actually feel welcome and like you truly mean it when you say that you want them to participate. And what I also heard kind of inherent in what both of you shared is holding exposure and teaching youth about certain processes and then allowing them space as they engage with those processes to exert their opinions, to demonstrate in ways that make sense to them how they want to wield the power that's being shared with them. And I imagine, we do some participatory grant making and hold a little bit of that. Just what does it look like to teach and step out of the way? And often organizations struggle with that, but the struggle is critically important. So thank you both for sharing some of the very specific ways you all are ensuring that the youth we're talking about today have voice and have power in the process. And I want to pivot to talk a little bit about the most pressing issues that LGBTQ plus youth are facing in the region. We've talked about the ways that a little bit about the ways that housing is one of the big 4 or 5 issues that show up. Do either of you want to dig into that a little bit more or foreground other issues that are impacting these young people that maybe some of the folks who have joined us aren't aware of?
I'll start and then Erin, if you want to add. Housing is a very big issue for youth that we are seeing. One of our biggest campaign goals for the last, actually since we started, since 2019, has been to lower the age of consent for housing to 16 for young people in DC. Right now in DC, there is a youth shelter that is open for young people under 18, but after a certain period of time, either your parent or guardian has to consent or CFSA is called. And there's a vast majority of young people who make the choice just to leave because they either cannot get in touch with their parent, there is friction happening within that family, and there's a reason why they're there, so they don't want to get in touch with their parent, and they've had very negative experiences or heard of negative experiences with CFSA, so they don't want that involvement. We've also know when CFSA has gotten involved in some of those cases, those young people still end up back on the streets, but now they don't feel like they can because of that experience they had with CFSA. And the vast majority of the young people that we're talking about experience homelessness for a lot of different reasons, but a significant amount of them have expressed it's because they are LGBTQ and they've had their family is for whatever reason not able to understand, accept, want to see that, and it's causing a lot of friction within their home. Some of our young people have expressed that even when CFSA got involved, they have increase to that friction because they see it as not neglect, not abuse. They just see it as a differing in parenting style, which can cause a lot of friction for young people. So I definitely think youth homelessness is a big issue. And I think that the other issue that we are seeing a lot from our young people is around mental health and social emotional support. I think that that affects them in a variety of ways. Um, we look at the gun violence, the pandemic, life, and those are all affecting our young people. And particularly with gun violence, the solutions that we're seeing coming from the city is punishment, criminalization of young people, don't keep them outside, give them curfew, all these things that are making them the perpetrators and the targets for like trying to control the gun violence instead of understanding and addressing the impact of the gun violence on young people. Like we've had out of every event, vast majority of our young people have either lost a friend or a family member to gun violence, has been in an area where a shooting has started, has experienced their school being locked down because of that. And the trauma that comes from that is not being addressed. The social emotional needs that come from that is not being addressed. And that is affecting our young people in a significant way. And I think it's really critical that we get more mental health support in schools, in communities, in areas for families, but also for their parents who are trying to navigate, letting your child go to school literally the next day, because they hardly ever shut schools down after the school was on lockdown. Like that is traumatic for the parents as well. And like that gives a lot of issues. And I think that when we look at youth truancy, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say, when we look at youth truancy, we don't put those two factors in connection, like the trauma with violence in your communities affecting your ability and your want to go to school.
All of that for sure. I'll try to speak to a different side of it, just to try to cover full. So I come from a world of, and I might be one of the folks that is having a hard time. I have a soft voice sometimes, so I'll try to speak up. A world of, federal funders, state funders, county, city, trying to figure out the solution to ending youth homelessness, and disproportionate amount of LGBTQ plus youth and Black and brown youth that are experiencing homelessness as compared to their, cis straight peers, et cetera. I think what we're continuing, there's a huge influx of dollars from HUD with the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program and across tons of communities trying to be innovative. And it was the first time we saw, a federal funder working from a homeless perspective in terms of innovation. We also have to think about scalability when we think about solutions. And so these two things are constantly held in terms of what is the right solution, knowing there's not one. And I think there's been a huge investment in transitional housing. And I think a huge limitation to transitional housing is it's time limited in a state of age and growth and emotional maturity. To expect a young person experiencing such crisis to resolve everything in 2 years, it's a bridge to either their next experience of homelessness or their next, struggle. So I think for me, what I have seen the most helpful is the solutions that aren't to scale yet, and we need to know more and more about those. So host homes was a big kind of grassroots type of housing among the LGBTQ plus community, where, if you're not familiar, where, queer families invited in a youth and, huge success, but it's not to scale and still struggling to get that to scale. And then providing a longer runway for young people. And so a lot of new work is happening with direct cash transfers and putting money in the hands of young people to decide how and where they need the most help. Again, back to that youth voice, centering youth voice, youth needs, taking away our adultist ideas that we know best, and really allowing young people to make the decision for what is best in their own lives, that they are the expert in their own lives. And so I think we've seen some success there and still need to know more there, but ultimately really a longer runway. We talk about transition age youth from 18 to 24, but really we need to look at up to 28, 27 to think about a holistic solution for someone who's experienced such incredible crisis and trauma and neglect and experiencing homelessness. And I'll second the mental health is a huge, huge issue.
So let's expand on this piece of the conversation. I'm interested to hear about any resources or organizations that you have seen do a good job of addressing some of the mental health challenges that you named, for example, Kristi, or I'm these days um, there are so many awful things happening in our community that it is critical for me to highlight whenever I can what's working, and and talk a little bit about good stories to help people understand that you're not just funding the challenges when you support, right? SMYAL, for example, you're really supporting making a difference and transforming what have been really difficult circumstances for a lot of youth. So I think it's helpful for folks to hear what success looks like when you are providing resources for young people. Like, what does a good here's a good example based on one of the things that you shared, Kristi. What does it look like for a family to run into challenges, both the parents and the young person access resources and have that turn around circumstances for a young person so they actually want to remain at home? I just kind of made that up on the spot, but can we talk about
Yeah.
what can we talk about what good outcomes look like?
Yes, and I will preface this by saying SMILE has a lot of good outcomes, so I'm gonna try not to like name any. But as it relates to housing and intervening, for example, Sasha Bruce, who is when they're able to get in touch with a parent or guardian, and the parent or guardian gives the child permission to stay, there is a process that they go through to see about reunification, to see how they can help heal that family dynamic and that family relationship. My wife actually is a product might not be the right word, but she is a graduate of Sasha Bruce Housing. She was put out of her home. She was staying with her great grandmother who didn't understand anything about her at all. And she was put out of her home, which actually helped her develop a strong relationship with her family. And she actually left Sasha Bruce to move back in with her great grandmother and take care of her great grandmother as she transitioned to out of this life. And that would have never been able to happen had she not had case managers, social workers intervening in her life at a point where she literally had nowhere to go, because her family just didn't necessarily understand who she was. That's just one small, slow scale example. So I say that to say there are organizations like Sasha Bruce, like SMILE, that are doing work that can really, if they had more support, more funding, more resources, could help scale up some of these success stories in that realm. As far as for mental health, I think that there are a significant amount of organizations that are existing, that are grassroots organizations that are doing work like Healing Circle series, social emotional learning series, on a very small scale. Organization called Bold Yoga does every Wednesday in Southeast DC. They do healing work for people in that community, and have a preference. I mean, they have a huge push for youth to join that. At DC Girls Coalition, we run a six series, Healing Circle series, that we run every summer from June into August, where we take 30 young people through a process of developing coping strategies and healing processes for trauma, um, stress, anxiety, and depression. What we have heard every year, first of all, we have to turn young people away every year because we don't have the capacity to have all of them. And every single year, we have young people who are reaching out to us in September, who are reaching out to us in October, who are reaching out to us in November, wanting to know when the series start. They have requested it since we began them for them to happen year round. We don't have the funding to do so. And so I say that to say that there are a significant amount of organizations that are doing great work on a very low scale because they are trying to do the best they can with the amount of funding that they have. And then we have other entities that are getting massive funding from the government that we don't have those same success stories for. And I think that's what we need to look at. That is essentially what I have to say about that, and some examples of what success looks like. I think the crutch of success looks like when a young person leaves the space feeling heard, seen, and with a foundation to continue to develop relationships with adults. And that's what some of the groups that I described are doing.
I'll add to that. Beautifully said, Kristi. I think oftentimes when we're thinking about youth experiencing homelessness, pushed out of their homes, or stuff going on within the family, we often look to the youth. How can we help the youth? And I think we really need to turn our heads to the adults, caregivers in that family, because oftentimes they're doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And I think this happens a lot in the child welfare system. We come in, we judge, this isn't working, and we pull, versus really thinking about, like, families want to do well, and they do well when they are well resourced and have the information to do that. I think we hear a lot from parents calling us and saying, we need you to help our kid. They're starting to identify as trans, or we're not sure, what to do. And the first question is always, is your kid struggling, or are you struggling? And so we can turn our head to where we need the most support, because when we're continuing to point to queer and trans youth as the problem, we're starting to create a narrative and a lack of sense of self and stability and security and a celebration of who they are, instead of helping that family really understand how they can work through their own stuff, to be able to have a whole family type of thing. I think some of the things that I've seen most successful in a lot of my work has been in Texas, which is often an overtaxed child welfare system. But one of the things that I know we did well at my other job is when we had a runaway 3 or more times to our shelter, instead of removing or calling child welfare, we created an intense counseling model for that family, where we did individual for everyone in the family and then family therapy for a period of time to hopefully, as Kristi said, that reunification is the absolute key to, I can go into statistics about kids that are removed, and they would have done better in the family with, some support, obviously. So anyway.
I appreciate hearing about just disrupting what we often think about when we consider trauma. And I think what I'm hearing, it's that it's a yes and, that we don't have enough resources for young people, and we need to add additional resources to help families grapple with the challenges together. And I mentioned earlier holding space to teach and empower and kind of get out of the way, and share power and get out of the way. That just popped up into my head again, but as it relates to the adults and families, they often need, they need to be taught and need exposure to concepts that others who intervene would be able to push through better than the young people and their families, with whom, there have been probably tense moments, and there is familial baggage that an expert can come in and say, can mediate. So I hope that those who are listening and funders will recognize that there's a dearth of resources across the board when it comes to mental health services, and that was the case before the pandemic. So it is particularly pressing now. And I have not seen from our side of things the influx of resources I would have thought we would have, given there were lots of conversations about what the other side of the pandemic was going to look like. And I haven't so far seen funders really answer the call to account for that, because most of us are still not well. And when you layer these other issues on top, folks need help and tools to heal together and individually. So I appreciate hearing you all talk through that. And I want to, so much of what both of you have shared, you've been plus oneing, kind of amening each other. And that led me to want to ask you about collaboration and what that looks like in two ways. What are barriers to collaborating with other organizations that are supporting young people, particularly in the LGBTQ plus community? What are some of those barriers? And then what are the benefits to linking arms with other organizations, advocates to move things forward?
I'll jump in. So the benefits are, right, the collective has the bigger impact. And I think, and it goes back to our conversation at the very beginning, the more people you have discussing and wrestling, to be honest, with these issues, so we understand the full scope and dynamic of what is happening and needs to happen, the more impact we'll have. I will say, moving to DC, the amount of coalition work is just incredible to me. And it is powerful and it's exciting, and it feels as though, as a medium-sized nonprofit, we're not alone, right? Like pushing these needles forward. And we've got people that are kind of fueling this work that sometimes feels very siloed. And so, I get kind of chills around just feeling, supported and loved on and in community when it comes to kind of the coalition work. I think the barrier, to be honest, is time. I think I spend a lot of my time in these meetings and a lot of time in front of council and a lot of time writing letters. And that is challenging on top of all the other, balls that we're trying to juggle at the same time. And so, trying to ensure that we are sitting at all these tables, but also that the right people are sitting at the tables. And so we'll oftentimes hear, we need your executive staff to be here because they're the decision makers. And so trying to make sure that I'm at least supporting an organization that the decision makers are at every level, and feel empowered to have voice in those spaces, so that we're not overtaxing, one person in an organization to be that voice, but we're really working with the entire organization to know, what it is that we want to advocate for, and push forward.
I agree with everything that you said, Erin, and I think the only thing that I would add as a barrier is similar to time, but in a different way. We are the coalition, so many of our members are direct service providers, and they're dealing with immediate needs of the people, the young people that they're serving, the families that they're serving, and so it's really sometimes difficult to get them in a space to tell us what they're seeing, to hear what solutions they're suggesting, what's not working, because they're literally in crisis with their community members or dealing with crises in a very real ongoing way. And I think that makes it difficult sometimes. I think one of the really strong benefits is when you're in coalition, everyone has their expertise and they're able to bring the expertise to the table, so you can have a holistic approach to addressing issues and a holistic approach to trying to figure out all of the elements. So that's why we are doing advocacy on mandatory reporting, on housing, on social emotional needs, on truancy. And I just had a conversation with someone today about environmental justice and how that plays in the factor, how we can get our young people involved in that work. Because not one person can be an expert in all those things, but if you're able to be in a coalition, you can tap into all of those experts when necessary, when needed, as well as that when young people come to you, they come to you with all kinds of problems and wanting solutions. And it's better to be able to reach your art far with people in coalition with you versus trying to become your own expert in all those areas.
Thanks, Kristi. I am, we're talking about youth, and one of your answers, Erin, you mentioned expanding, I think, the age from 24 to 28, which, got me to thinking about how various folks define when youth transitions to adulthood, right? Like what is that period? Is it, when you turn 25, are you officially considered an adult? And whatever that period of time is, whether it's 21, 25, 28, talking and sharing with the folks who joined us today the unique challenges that LGBTQ plus youth experience as they transition to adulthood, particularly if they've been ensnared in the homelessness crisis, right? Like what does that look like if you are transitioning out of youth and you're flailing and aren't anchored anywhere? How does that translate into your adulthood journey? And then what are some of the ways your organizations are involved in softening that landing?
I'll jump in really quick. I think one thing that I think for whatever reason that we, youth that are in services, social services, we use this mark of, transition to adulthood, self-sufficiency, arrival. Tamara, you mentioned that it's a journey, not a destination. And I don't know, I am not fully dependent, right? Like we are independent. We have dependencies in so many facets and areas of our lives. And so I think we do you specifically a disservice, specifically, LGBTQ plus youth, Black and brown youth, homeless youth, where we say to them, like, what's going to get you to self-sufficiency? We're measuring self-sufficiency and independence versus thinking about what does your community and support system look like and how can I help you build that community around you so that dependence is an ability to lean when needed and to also receive support and give support when needed. And so I think that's a big part of the conversations that we have. We've built this youth homeless system in DC and this adult, and it's a firm line. There is no crossing over. And that's a hard drop for young people who are coming up on that age of like, what is next for me? And it's almost re-traumatizing of like, I remember when I, had to leave home. Like, it was like, I feel like my earth has dropped out from underneath me. And so I can't imagine for these young people, like you've got 6 months left, 4 months left, 3 months left. And so I think we really try to talk about what is the destination in terms of where do you want to be after you leave here? What do you envision? What do you want that to look like? And how can we set goals to help you get there? Realistic goals. Because for young people who are 22, I think 2 years in a program feels like a very long time, but that really moves really quickly. So really talking about kind of where is that next step for you from the beginning. And then I think additional things that we're trying to do is how do we create a landing pad past the program? So, okay, you're able to get an apartment, you're able to get employment, but we all know my jobs were all over the place at that age. So a landing pad in terms of you need some financial support for the next 2 months in order to get a new job, stable, etc. And then creating, the intentional life skills around that. So I think we talk about budgeting, but what does it mean for a young person to budget and think about that from a practical standpoint, grocery shopping, those types of things.
Well, and also if you are estranged from your family, there are some organic ways that knowledge gets transferred, right, around some of the very issues you were just talking about, Erin. And so there's the the trauma of the countdown, but then just the lack of um, a built-in support network that exacerbates that. And it's got to be incredibly frightening. And conversely, helpful if you've got the programs, but also mentors that can maybe see you through the transition and provide, become the family that you got to choose, or the family that you grew to love and depend on outside of your biological family. I think I might have interrupted you, Kristi.
No, you didn't. I was gonna say something similar to along the lines of what you were gonna say. I just want to say, I think that it's really critical when we think about like what it looks like for someone to be struggling with housing, LGBTQ, or a young person in general. When you're at that age and they're like a tale of two cities. In one part, you hear often like, oh, when you're in your 20s, you get to explore the world, you get to just make all the mistakes in the world, and it's this amazing time. But when you are literally not sure where you're going to wake up, not sure what's
Yep.
going to happen, not sure where your money comes from, that freedom feels like a prison because you don't have the support to fall back on. And I think that is what we're talking about. Like when I was in my 20s, I moved to DC, no care in the world, because I knew if I fell, I could go home. Like I knew that that was an option. And so I think that that's the safety net that we need to be talking about. And I think when we're talking to young people about like, what are your goals? Why is it if you're low income, you're homeless, you're LGBTQ and homeless, you have to know what you want to do in 2-3 years, where most young people have no idea and they try different things. Some try college, it doesn't work for them, they drop out. Some want to try college, they don't have the money to go, so they get a job to start paying for college so they can eventually go. So I think the more of the conversation, it should be around what do you need right now to help you feel stable in this moment to get to wherever you need to be next? Because they don't necessarily know the next. Because did you know the next when you were 18, 19, 20? I don't even know the next now, and I'm 40. So I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years. This is what I'm doing now, but I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years. So why do we expect young people who are dealing with really hard things that people who are older than them experience and don't know how to handle to know that next? I think that is critical for us to think about. And I think in particularly for LGBTQ young people, when you like when I knew I was a lesbian very young. I did not come out until I was very stable. Like, I mean, I was off my parents' insurance. I was in my own apartment. I had a stable car, a stable house. I was on my own. And I did that intentionally because I was from North Carolina. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how my families were going to react. And eventually my family definitely came around, but I wanted to make sure that I was stable. But the reality is that was a privilege that I had to make sure that I was stable. That was an absolute privilege that I had to do that, that I was able to separate my personal life from my family for so long. And not every young person can do that. And so when you experience of learning who you are, and then you have the people who are supposed to love you no matter what you are, turn your back, that is traumatic. That breaks your trust in humanity. That's really critical. So whoever's in front of you saying, I want to help you, why and how can you trust them when the people who are supposed to be helping you have broken that trust? And I don't think we talk about that enough, like that break that occurs when the one person that was entrusted to help you grow up in whatever fashion now has decided that you're disposable, and now I'm supposed to trust this other adult to not make that same decision. It can be very traumatizing, and we need to give young people space to deal with that. And when I say young people, I don't mean like young in age, I mean young in their journey and discovering who they are. Because that is extremely hard to deal with if you don't have the right support system in place.
Thanks for that, Christina. I want to transition to Q&A. As we're doing that, can each of you quickly name one or two things as members of the community, and take that as you want, as biological family members, extended family, broader community. What are some practical things that folks can do to create more inclusive environments for young people in this community? Just kind of popcorn, anything that comes to mind quickly.
So for me, I'm thinking about my own, this is like therapy for me. But I think what is really critical is that we need to stop making assumptions that we know young people's identity just based on how they're presenting to us. I think that we need to leave space for young people to tell us who they are and despite what they're presenting to us, because sometimes masks are worn because you're terrified to show who you are. So, and I mean, like if they're presenting as this angry kid who doesn't want to take space to try to let them get ready to tell you exactly what's going on. I think that's one thing. And I think in the broad community, if you are in a space where there are young people, always make sure that they are able to know they can talk to you. Every person I interact with has kept my number and still call me because I've tried to make it so I am someone you can come to. And that doesn't mean I'm always going to understand or I've been through the same thing, but like you can come to me and we can brainstorm together. And I think as adults, that's what we need to do. Create space for young people to be safe and able to tell you what's going on, even if you don't know the solution. The fact that they know that they can come talk to you about it and you can brainstorm with them, I think is very effective.
So be open and available and allow young people to tell you who they are and how they show up. Let them define that. Thank you, Kristi. Erin?
Yeah, I'll just add, queer and trans youth are dynamic, complex human beings, just as their cis straight peers. And I know when I came out, my only identity for a very long time with my family was that I was a lesbian, and that was my pure identity. And in all other spaces and community, I was so many other things. I was a creator, I was funny, I was, a sister, all these different things. And so I
A
think
Taurus.
yeah, Taurus, really looking at the dynamic human and just because you might be uncomfortable with the one piece, really continue to look at the whole human being and focus on that whole human being.
I love that. Thank you both for helping to close out this part of the conversation with those with that counsel, actionable counsel. So I see, let's see, I see this question. As an older member of the community, 68 years old, although I've worked with DC Girls Coalition and SMYAL and committed to all of our young people growing up, great. How can we include more seniors in this conversation so they can learn and understand what they don't know and can support these young people in authentic and compassionate ways? What a wonderful question. It actually dovetails with a few of the pieces we've discussed together. Kristi, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I think it's important that we create space for young people to interact with seniors. So I have been trying to be intentional on doing that. So I'm working very closely with the grandparent organizing entity where I've invited them to several different of our events to hear what young people are saying. They've invited us to some of their events, and we're trying to figure out how we can co-create. Because I think one thing unique about seniors in our communities and young people that I don't even think most people realize that they have in common is that both are often told what they need. Both experience is often dismissed as I've already been there, done that. I know what you need. And both are often neglected in very real ways. And not seen as valuable members of our community, even though they are literally the start and finish of our entire world. And so I think that that's one thing that I'm trying to do, and I think that we need to create space for that. And I think that we need to make sure that we are advocating for that, and also when we're talking to young people, asking them what they would like to see from seniors in their communities and things of that nature are important. We're working very heavily with this particular group to create a grandparent bench. It's happened in other places in other countries where, grandparents just sit and they serve as a listening ear to anyone who wants to sit at the table and like vent about what's going on. We're trying to be intentional in creating that space because our seniors that we're working with know that they need to know more so they can respect what's coming in that space, but also they feel like they have a lot of value to give to young people. So I think creating intentional spaces and moments is something we're working on, but it definitely is needed more.
Anything to add there, Erin?
I mean, that was just a mic drop. So I
Yeah.
think that was beautifully said. Yeah.
Yeah, the value piece in particular really resonated with me, Kristi. You know, there's so much lived experience. People talk about wisdom, sure, but there's just straight up lived experience, and a desire to share it. And I love the idea of creating opportunities to match up communities that are pigeonholed and stereotyped way too often. So I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, but I do want to flag it. It's something I meant to mention at the top of our time together, that, you know, June is LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And I don't know about you, Kristi and Erin, I rarely see young people centered in the celebrations that happen and the acknowledgments that happen in June. And it's one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation with you all. And I encourage those who joined us today, you know, throughout the rest of this month and as the years go by, you know, we can all do, I think, a better job of centering, celebrating what is, celebrating the ways in which this work is evolving, celebrating the ways in which organizations like your organizations are sharing power with young people, and highlighting that more. I mean, all of these months, I think the commodification of a lot of these heritage months is real. And, you know, all of the rainbow flags and opportunities to have some of the discussions that happen are lovely, but there are some really tangible ways that we could use our platforms better to serve these young people, many of whom have so much potential and have so much to give, and just need more love, and they need more resources. So I'm hoping we can do better. I did see, let's see. Oh, here's one other question. I'm going to press time and just throw it out there. What are some ways you're engaging youth in civic engagement through housing or other forms of advocacy to change the current landscape of our political system? Any quick answers to that? I bet, Kristi, you probably have something that popped up.
Real quick. So we have a whole agenda that is on our website that was developed by young people that we're pushing. We do council visits, testimonials, actions. We host a youth summit every August to prepare our demands for the year. And every January, we have a youth town hall. Last January, we had 165 young people in attendance, 3 council members, and 3 agencies. And we hope to go bigger this year, where we invite young people to come and really lay the platform for what they want youth advocacy to look like. So we're doing a lot of different things, and I can definitely go into details at a later date if people want, or over email if people want more. And I did see one other question. I just wanted about foster care and how you can get
Please.
involved.
Yes.
And I just want to really say you can reach out to Mothers Outreach Network, and there are a couple of other organizations. I know we're out of time. I'm sure there's some way you can get my email. I can send you. There's a lot of different organizations that works with current foster care young people as well as former, who you can connect with if you're interested in doing that work.
I'm so grateful to both of you for being here and participating in this really important conversation. It means a lot to the Women's Foundation that you took time to talk today and share your expertise and resources and perspectives, and to be vulnerable, which both of you were. So thank you. And the time went by really fast. So thank you to everybody who joined us today. If you'd like to stay connected with the DC Girls Coalition or SMYAL, please visit their websites and follow them on social media. And I'm going to end, as I often do, by reminding you that the end of our fiscal year at the foundation is 10 days from now. So support SMYAL and DC Girls Coalition, and also support us in this last push to the end of the year. You can do that through our website. And we also have a great match opportunity that's happening. So anything you give will be matched up to $50,000, and we are in full swing for that effort. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.